Is that like parachute?
No.
You know, when you're falling from the sky and you need something to catch you? Parachute.
What?
I don't know. All right. Well, look, I got a big piece of paper today.
Oh, so fancy.
No more ticker tape. So we are being told to discuss what the meaning of why some headphones say 30 kilohertz, why some say 50 kilohertz, when people can't even hear that high.
There's a few reasons for that one, as usual. I think it primarily, for most people at least, it's just kind of like a bit of a battle to make yourself look better or make it look like your driver's better.
Marketing?
Yeah. You know, it's just to make it look more impressive. You put a bigger number up there and it's better. You know, 2's better than 1,
Yeah.
5's better than 3. If you make the number bigger, it must be better, right?
Yeah.
That has some psychological effect, probably, to some people.
I'd say the low frequency number is more important than the high frequency number, but, you know,
Well,
even that could be a stretch. I mean, you could go, you know, you could really, those ratings are,
Unless the high's like 8K or something, then it'd be like,
yeah, that would be bad. It'd be worse than like FM radio.
this is
Yeah.
a bit more fickle than the average person would indicate, though. You just look at the numbers, you think, oh, well, this one goes higher, maybe that's better. But the average person is perceived to only hear up to 20 kilohertz, and that's very misrepresentative. If you actually go and test your hearing, you listen to test tones with things that
Yeah.
are able to reproduce it. Most people can't hear above 16, 17
Yeah.
kilohertz. And as you age,
when
maybe
you're
12
young,
or 14.
Maybe if
you
you're in your early 20s or younger, you might be able to hear 20.
know.
probably
But
less
that's
than that,
pretty, that's tough.
That's very
like 10.
optimistic.
20 kilohertz is pretty tough.
10 years
Right.
old.
10 years old?
Then you're probably can hear it.
Yeah, you
Maybe.
lose it faster than most people
Yeah.
expect. Really, above 14 is not
Yeah.
not great for most people.
Probably once you're in your 30s or so, you're not going to hear much
Right.
above 15 kilohertz. But they do say that people can appreciate that higher end. Like they've done tests where like they've thrown super tweeters on speakers, which are, you know, they only do the highs, like
Yeah.
way highs, like 15, 16 kilohertz and up.
Yeah.
You know, they're just made to augment the whatever the speaker's response is. And they say that people notice it even though they can't hear it on its own, they notice the effect it has on a speaker. So, you know,
Yeah, JBL does that
Yeah.
because they got their standard horn and then they put a super tweeter above that.
yeah.
And I remember I went up to it one time when we were listening to him,
Yeah.
and it's like it doesn't seem like it's doing anything, but it must be like so high you can't hear it.
Yeah, there's some perception that goes on, I think, with people that, you know, I don't know whether you might not be cognitive of it type thing, but it can affect it. So I guess there's some truth in saying that, well, you know, it'd be nice to have the driver have a frequency range that's beyond audibility,
Yeah,
so to
well
speak.
outside.
Yeah, you know, but then the electronics tend to, like CD, I think rolls can't go above 20. Absolutely, brick filter it
Yeah.
can't. Most digital won't. Won't. It can't. Runs into problems above 20,
Right.
so they filter it out. So you can't even play above
Well,
20. You know,
You need a better source.
yeah. I don't know. I'd say 30 kilohertz is a good number. If you're anywhere near that, even 25.
Well, another
You
thing
know?
with that, the marketing aspect of that can be a bit challenging because you look at the numbers and you could compare directly, or at least you would think you could compare directly one headphone to another in the frequency response. But that's not always the case because a lot of times they don't tell you at what point they decide this no longer reproduces this frequency.
When you won't hear it.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's kind of sort of loose standards for this one. Everybody does what they want to some extent.
Pretty
they don't
much.
always tell you how they measure it, how they got these results.
Right.
There's plenty of headphones that could play higher than they indicate, but it may not be as loud as you would expect it to be. It may not be as loud as another headphone. So typically,
Right.
as the frequency goes up towards the limits, the output of the headphone, the driver, will roll off. It'll decrease in volume for the same input stimulus. And the trouble with that is at what point is too quiet, right? Or what point do you consider it no longer able to reproduce? It's not
And then-
like you hit 21 kilohertz and a headphone that's rated at 20. It's just you don't hear it.
Right.
It's
It doesn't
gone.
it just doesn't
It gets a little
stop.
quieter.
It can roll quickly above a certain amount, but it just
Potentially.
doesn't stop.
Right.
But then again, your hearing pretty much stops right
Well,
pretty fast.
pretty abrupt,
At
yeah.
whatever your limits are, given your age, you know. So, you know, yeah. Bottom line is, above 20K or so, or even above 18K, who the hell's going to hear it anyway? So, you know. But yeah, most headphones, I think, most drivers, transducers today can do above 20 kilohertz. I mean, shit, you'd have to have you have to be using a towel or a blanket for a driver to not do the high
Yeah.
frequency energy.
There's
You know,
plenty of damping materials you could put in a driver.
you
That
could
would
kill
really
it.
be a
Yeah,
problem.
you could do it
with
on
really
purpose.
high frequency
Yeah,
range.
Get rid of it.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, though, that doesn't seem like there's any disadvantage to having it allow to pass through the high frequencies.
No, unless for some reason it's distorted up there, and then that distortion could bleed down into the lower registers
Well,
somehow.
that's kind of B&W talks about that because they keep raising their tweeters higher and higher. Like they were in the 20s, now
Yeah.
they're in like 37K or something.
Yeah.
Because they say something about like the breakup as they increase the breakup of the tweeter higher and higher.
Right.
It sounds better.
Well, that's true because you could get some sort of distortion artifacts that.
Yeah.
I mean, the material's is ringing at a certain frequency,
Right,
even
yeah.
if it is in the
So
ultrasonic range,
put it
right?
really, really
It's
high.
potential. So yeah, I've
Yeah.
heard of that. So but again, that's kind of a little different because you're looking at distortion characteristics and so on.
Yeah.
And you got to have information being fed to the driver for it to cause that. So again, if your system's rolling above 20 kilohertz, and there's nothing there to distort the driver anyway, then you don't have to worry about these things, which, I think most audio systems are made to roll. I mean, the amplification tends to go out. It could go higher, way higher than 20. 50 to 100 kilohertz is not uncommon, but most of the sources won't do it. Like,
Yeah.
I know digital for sure. It's got to roll above. It just doesn't allow above 20 kilohertz.
Depends on your source.
Yeah.
But you could have a chain that would be able to put out 40 kilohertz, 50 kilohertz.
Sure.
It's possible. It doesn't seem to provide much of an advantage for most people, but
Yeah.
it also isn't typically detrimental. So I don't think it really has an appreciable impact for the average person. I don't think it should be something you focus in on.
Not at all.
But having the driver able to reproduce higher frequencies, it's usually not a bad thing. It just doesn't really provide the advantage
Yeah.
that I think somebody would think.
Well, like everything, you don't want drivers amplification and so on. You really don't want them to stop necessarily,
Right.
but they don't. That's what
Yeah.
we're saying with a transducer. It starts to roll at some high frequency and low frequency.
Yeah.
It has its limitations on both ends of the spectrum. It's just a question of where it rolls and how quickly. But like we said, for most people, you're not going to hear it if it's rolling at 25 kilohertz or 30 or 50. And if you do, let us know, because like I said, it's probably an artifact. It's probably something else going on there. It's probably not the actual frequency you're hearing.
Right.
You know,
Pretty much for most people, if your driver and your entire chain could put out 25 kilohertz, you're already like 10 kilohertz or so bandwidth above where your practical hearing
Yeah.
limit is anyway. So the benefits are very trivial at that point. It's very unlikely
You're-
you're going to get better distortion characteristics.
you're
at lower
more likely to
frequencies.
hear a noise or something in the system that isn't even the music, or some weird mix of frequencies in a recording that's bleeding through that's getting up there, because really I'm not really sure what the hell in a recording there'd be. I mean, you could have fundamental harmonics of what's high frequency string instruments or something like that, but I don't think you're going to hear, you can't hear that. So I don't know. I mean, I've never really looked at current research on that. I know they've done it in the past. Again, I've heard that they've mentioned that ultrasonic frequencies do seem to have some sort of, let's say, unknown response from humans. But I think you need to be a bat or a wasp or something to hear stuff out there. It's not within the human characteristic, and I really don't think it's going to affect your music one iota. So yeah, I don't think you worry about the high frequencies much, but
Yeah, I agree.
yeah,
I don't know what else we could add to that.
yeah, me neither. Don't worry about the highs as long as as long as and really you got to listen to it anyway. It's all got to be, the high frequency energy has to all be in proper perspective. It can't be overbearing.
Right.
You don't want to get a headphone that was purposely speccing it to go to 40K because they're boosting the highs, where
Right.
you're actually creating an artificially too hot treble,
Mm.
which some do. That's typical.
I've seen this before too. Some people specify the limits at like 10, 15 dB down, or crazy numbers like that are so unrealistic.
Yeah. Well, you
I
could
think
still
the
hear 15
profile-
dB down,
Yeah.
but
Maybe,
it's
but that's
low.
a big
it's lower.
difference.
It's low. Yeah.
So
you know?
it really depends on how meaningful you want it to be. But
Yeah.
10, 15 dB down starts to get pretty quiet. So to say a driver is capable of doing that is, I think, a bit misleading because some people define the limits as 3 dB down.
Yeah.
Others just pick
Well,
a number.
3 dB is still pretty loud, but
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
noticeable.
3 is not bad, but
when you
10
start
to
getting
15,
to like
you're getting
25, 30 dB down now, it's pretty much disappearing.
Right.
You know.
Yeah, it's in the
But again,
noise.
yeah, it's true. It depends what you're listening to.
defining the approach to the limits on both ends seems more appropriate to actually
Yeah.
show you visually what the ramp looks like as it approaches the limits of the driver. But this is so far in the weeds for the average person. I think the vast majority of the impact you're going to get comes from outside of the upper range of the frequency spectrum.
Yeah.
That it doesn't matter that much. Your gear, the
No.
cabling, how it's connected, how it fits on you, how you feel that day, the temperature, the weather. These probably matter more to most people.
Yeah, the harmonic structure of what's being played back is way more critical than worrying about getting in the 20 plus kilohertz range. It's so maybe with some drivers that affects it, but we don't have that issue. So anyway, don't worry about it. You'll hear the highs if they're there. Yeah, for the most part, really, as we all know, you got to listen to them. The frequency response giving you two numbers and guessing what's in between
That's right.
is freaking useless information. It
Pretty
really
much,
is,
yeah.
So anyway, thanks for watching, everybody, and please subscribe if you like what we're doing and give us a thumbs up. Take care of yourself.